Raouf, if I can bring you in here, what is your view? Do you feel that countries in the global south are being asked to shoulder more than they can cope with, while the north, faced with a crisis, appears to be backtracking on pledges and promises?
Thank you very much, ma'am. Well, first of all, let me thank you for having me in this very important session, and I would like to express my deep appreciation to Dr. Abla for her really relentless efforts, in order to consider one of the most important issues in the world today. Sometimes she trapped me, and this is one of the traps she have put me in. Second, I'm here I'm in my personal capacity, so I'm not representing an official opinion, rather than to express my views, particularly that I'm already a consultant to COP27. And I think it's important to speak not on the energy crisis per se, but I would like to address something a little bit larger than that, which is the equation of energy security and climate change. I think COP27 will be under tremendous challenges, that adds to the already existing challenges on climate change. And that is reflected in, as you very correctly referred to, we have two problems in the short and the longer term. In the short term, the Ukraine crisis has created a global energy crisis, and that led the developed world, particularly the EU, to resort back to fossil oils. All right, and this is quite understandable because, under the situation that we are witnessing today in Europe, I think you cannot just stop short from finding any solutions, at least in the short term. And that's why they have focused very much to go back to fossil oils, particularly through Africa. And this by itself would raise the risk that we would not be able to attain the 1.5 Celsius temperature, and would be in principle contradictory to the equation of climate change. However, as I said, it's quite understandable that the EU has to do and had to do it, and I think will continue to do that. And I think they have focused their efforts in order to find a quick solution that they're approaching Africa, which has huge reserves of fossil oils. Meanwhile, I think from my readings and follow-up of all the reports coming on, the EU is trying to have a balance that, to invest more than $10 billion in climate change, parallel to the efforts that are being taken now for resorting back to fossil oils. However, this is one challenge, big challenge in the short term. If we look at the situation in Africa, Africa is going through a very difficult time, economically, politically maybe, and you cannot ask them not to invest in the huge reserves of fossil oils, while they are not giving up their efforts to mitigate the climate repercussions. But meanwhile, they are short of possibilities, whether financially or even technologically, in order to achieve this kind of balance. So the African countries are facing today two major dilemmas. That on one side, they are determined to invest in their reserves. But meanwhile, the second dilemma is, on a longer term, the risk is that what would happen to Africa if we revert back fully to climate Green Deal, and we have to remember that the EU has launched, a great initiative in order for the Green Deal, by which that by 2030 we will have to reach 50% of carbon neutrality and 100% in 2050. So the big question, what Africa would do in order to follow the whole world in pursuing these efforts, in order to mitigate climate change. That would lead us to one of the critical areas of COP27 and beyond, which is the finance.
Right. Let's come back to the finance.
Okay. Well, before I talk about finance, I think let's be clear that we are facing at least three major considerations. One is how to have a combination of attaining an energy system of free emissions in the long term, together with the security, with the energy security in the short term. This is very difficult challenge, right? That's one. Two is it's clear that under the current situation, what we are talking about as climate justice is far away from us, right? And that's due to the crisis that emerged, on us and imposed the kind of challenges. Three is, well, as has mentioned by our friend from Africa, well, Egypt is holding the conference on Africa's behalf. And that's why, as Ambassador just mentioned, Africa will and should be higher or the highest on the agenda without disregard of the interests of the whole world, of course. So if we apply all these considerations on the finance issue, we are facing a real problem with the finance crisis, not only because of the Ukraine crisis, but as regards the $100 billion, according to the last report by the OECD, the $100 billion have been financed by only 80%, but this is not the most important issues. The 80% were largely through loans and essentially to the middle-income countries in Asia, not in Africa. So this is something that has to be taken into consideration. My concern, even personally, as a citizen, all right, that in COP20, Hadr, all the time instructions, Hadr, H-A-D-E-R, for those who don't understand Hadr. All right. No, she means that because she doesn't want to speak, all right.
Think of it as like an ice cream, so you keep it closer.
We are talking about COP27 as an implementation conference, all right? And we cannot get out of Sharm el-Sheikh, with empty-handed. That would be serious, not for the COP27, nor for the COP28, but it's for the whole world. And the concern that I have, and I hope it's untrue, that we might face a situation where the rich countries would suggest that, well, due to the Ukraine crisis, they are short of finances. So this would be a real issue. But my response to this, that no matter how long wars take, but wars will have to come to an end, no matter how long it takes, as I say. But on the contrary, for the climate change, all right, the longer it continues, the most serious and risky it becomes, and would affect the whole world. And there are consequences of, delaying a serious considerations for the climate mitigation, adaptation, loss on all other factors related to climate change, that the serious, very dangerous repercussions, that result from the short of finance for climate change is creating not only climate change repercussions, but they're creating political, economic, social repercussions. For example, now there is a new term that has been created by the problems of climate change that we call it environment refugee, right? And according to the reports, over the last 10 years, and we have 200, almost 30 million refugees. And that number is very much possible to increase by the nature anger that we are facing. I'm just finishing, right? So I think the message should be clear, right? No matter how the problems, that the Europe and the developed countries are facing due to the Ukraine crisis, well, to be clear and frank, I think, when the crisis happened, the safes of Europe and the States and others were opened, all right? And a flow of huge finances have been going to Ukraine. And I think that should not be an excuse. Should not be an excuse, because the crisis is so serious, and will have to be faced with seriousness, because after all, the whole world will suffer. Not only Africa, maybe Africa more than others, but the whole world would suffer from this. So I hope that when we come to COP27, that the clear fact that the risk is not only climate change. The risk is, if we do not address the climate change seriously, then we are heading all together, the whole world, to a crisis that could be out of our control.